Coming up, we lost a legend in Black American television. No, in American television. We talk about and reflect on the legacy of Malcolm-Jamal Warner, many known as Theo. Plus, it's almost football season, so y'all know what that means. A lot of media beefs already starting. Plus, Hunter Biden and the crack epidemic. And John Harbaugh has upset Ravens fans. Coming up on this week's edition, breaking through glass ceilings with uncomfortable conversations. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Through Glass Ceilings. I'm your host, Brian H. Waters. This show brought to you by 6HM Productions. Folks, I was sitting at my workstation in my house on Monday morning, maybe Monday afternoon, and my better half and co-CEO, Queen PR, sent me a message. And like we do, we see news, we'll send it to each other, and usually it's met with a haha or oops or what have you. On this occasion, she sent me a message, and it was like, it was the link that declared that Malcom-Jamal Warner had tragically died drowning. So it hit hard. There's celebrity deaths that you look and you be like, oh man, that's crazy. But then there's some that's just like, it just strike you differently. You don't necessarily have to keep them on your radar. You may not watch every single venture that they've been up to, but there's point in times in your life where they met something, where you could relate. That was the case for me with Malcolm-Jamal Warner. Now, we remember him as Theo Huxtable from the Cosby Show. And for me personally, Theo was somebody I could relate to. He grew up in the house. He's the only boy. Like Theo, the third son, like myself. And there was the expectation where he's listening to his parents. His father's teaching him how to be a man. Always has to look out after his younger sisters. Now, with me, I grew up in the house. At first, it was just me and my younger sister. And then when my grandmother passed away, my three adopted aunts moved in. And then one of them moved out earlier. So that was where I'm like, wow. And growing up, we watched the Cosby Show as a family. So when I say I related to him, because it was a lot of those lessons that I could get through television. Now, my dad would give me life lessons, obviously. But we think about some of the memorable episodes, right? We all know about the Gordon Gartrell, right? That shirt, because he wanted to be cool. He wanted to impress his lady. And it was a $95 shirt. And he put it on, but his parents said, no, you got to take it back. His older sister coming to the rescue. Denise said, well, I can make it. And we all know it wasn't a Gordon Gartrell. It didn't look right. And they made Theo wear it. And I remember one of his friends was like, oh, well, I want one. And Heathcliff was like, no. There's that episode, right? There's the episode where he's talking to his dad about how he's going to live, and his father explains money to him. Said, okay, you're going to have to pay for this, you're going to pay for that, you're going to pay for this. That's one that stands out. Another one that I always think about is Dance Mania. You remember Dance Mania when him and Cockroach were going back and forth because there was one spot left, and they were going back and forth on who would go. And then after, I think it was 3 or 4, Cockroach says, I'll go. Theo's upset. His mom says, why are you upset? He said, because I told Cockroach he can go. And then he was supposed to turn it back to me. And then I was going to say, fine, I'll go. And that was a life lesson. She said, no, if you wanted to go, you should have said something. So I think about that, his role as Theo Huxtable and how important it was to society. And then you think about Malcom-Jamal Warner, the man. Earlier, I was playing a video game, and as I do, I listen to podcasts. And I was listening to a show where he had Keisha Knight Pulliam, who played Rudy as his younger sister on the show. And the thing that stood out about that was their relationship, their bond. And they said they had the trifecta. They were close. Their spouses were all close. And then their children, their daughters were close. So it just, you look at over the course of time, there was Malcolm and Eddie, and he played in a lot of other shows. And I'm not even going to sit up here and say, oh, I was watching everything Malcom-Jamal Warner was watching. But as I sit back and reflect on who he was, I think about him being one of the good ones from Hollywood, right? We always hear these horror stories about kids who had lives in Hollywood and they turn to drugs, they turn to alcohol, they still live in that fantasy world. And you never heard anything bad about him. At least I didn't. And there's the thing where you think about, if there's anybody, if you wanted to put your child in Hollywood, he was one of those people you wanted your child to turn out to be like. And then I think about him and Rudy and their relationship. They talked about how they all, they have a bond because they were a part of something special. Now, unfortunately, we know the acts committed by Bill Cosby, and why he had to spend some time away. And that's unfortunate. And it sucks because they were affected by that, right? Because then people are looking at them. Did you know? What was your part? And then if they go defend and say, well, that wasn't the Bill Cosby I knew, naturally people will say, oh, you just taking up for him. So it was all of that, man. And it's sad. This is one that hurts. And my thoughts and prayers go out to his daughter. We found out today that she was in the pool. I mean, they were in the water in Costa Rica, and they were both trying to survive. And she survived. People helped her. And unfortunately, he didn't. 8 years old. And as a father of a 10-year-old, it's devastating to even think about what my daughter would have to go through if I wasn't here. And so I wanted to take time to just recognize and appreciate and show love to Malcom-Jamal Warner and, just thank him for all his contributions to society. And thank you for everything you've done for us, brother. Rest well.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to support this podcast by wearing a t-shirt, whether it's the one that says breaking through glass ceilings or the one that says no ceilings above success, simply go to foryourwear.com. Also, you can support some of your other favorite podcast and content creators, including Those Wrestling Girls, Seahawk, and the Wrestling Club. And you can support some of your favorite independent wrestlers, including Jay Bougie, Trisha Dora, Chaz the Don. Shoot, all the Pure Ignorance is on there. So go on foryourwear.com, go under personalities, you'll find Brian H. Waters, and buy a t-shirt. And remember, I'll give you a shout out on the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, are you in the gym every week? Are you looking to kind of keep yourself cool while you work up a nasty sweat? Well, I got the best thing for you. Cooling bands, bandanas, cooling towels, and so much more. Go to Vertical Athletics, get your favorite team in MLS or MLB, or guess what? Now they have a custom option so you can upload your own logo and you can save 10% at checkout when you enter the code Brian H. Waters. Go to vertical.com, use the code Brian H. Waters to save 10% on some of your best cooling gear. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm back. So I want to take time to talk about Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden, we all know, had an addiction to crack and cocaine. And that's been a discussion lately. He's admitted to it. He opened up about it. But the awareness that I wanted to bring, because I was watching Right Time with Bomani Jones, and Van Lathan was on there. Shout out to Van. And one of the things they did discuss was how Hunter Biden and people of his stature, right, who do have these addictions, were the ones who were keeping the drug dealers in business, right? So Van shares a story about a friend of his who told him that it's not the people we deem as crackheads that's in the streets that's keeping the drug dealers rich. Because when you think of crackheads, you think of people who are addicted so much that they have to sell things. They steal in the sell, they flip it, right? But he's talking about the people who can't afford it. And they talked about Hunter Biden and how he had the influence to introduce people to crack, right? And it brought me to this piece wrote by a good friend of mine, Isaiah Griffith. He penned a op-ed to the Baltimore Banner, and it's called "Letter: Supervised Drug Consumption Sites Save Lives." And in this piece, he's talking about this bad batch of drugs found in Baltimore. And the Baltimore Banner did a profile, and they reported on a mass overdose, right? It's called "Focusing on Keeping People Alive. Baltimore Reels After at Least 27 Hospitalized in Mass Overdose." And the thing that stuck out to me about this in this op-ed from Isaiah is that he talked about how we need to take this stigma out of public health, right? Stigma has no place in public health. If someone were having a heart attack, we help them without judgment. The same urgency and dignity should guide our responses to overdose. And the reason why that stood out is I mentioned earlier, we talked about people who are addicted to crack and cocaine, and we call them as crackheads, right? The moment we see somebody pass out, right? Or the masses see somebody pass out, they're going to look at them like, all right, let's get them some help, whatever. Or if somebody's rushed to the hospital, even somebody like a Hunter Biden, right? The moment he introduced crack to, as Van and Bomani said, the first thing we're going to say is, "Oh, you want crack?" As opposed to trying to get help for these people. So I appreciate this piece by Isaiah because I'm looking at it like we do need to curb the stigma. We need to get rid of the stigma that we have and the shame that we put on people who are addicted to crack and cocaine. And maybe Hunter Biden, he's survived and he survived his addiction. Hopefully he could change that stigmatism, because when you think about it, he's someone of influence. So just reading this, it really touched me because I'm like, yes, Isaiah's right. We do need that, because I didn't think about that. We think about how public health concerns, anytime you talk about sanitary conditions, if somebody gets sick, we going to help them with no cause, right? Years ago, it was the summer of 2016, there was a gunshot victim. This young lady got shot, and she got shot while she was outside getting her boyfriend, baby father, some food. She was pregnant, and they had to deliver the baby. And I was working in Johns Hopkins media relations, and I was doing a media escort where I was sitting there with the doctor and the journalist. And the journalist started poaching, to be honest with you, He was trying to ask, well, do you think maybe she was in the wrong place or somewhere she shouldn't have been, or something along that lines, right? And if he didn't, that's the way my interpretation to the question. The doctor cut it off immediately and said, the best thing about his position is he don't have to judge. She got shot. His job wasn't to think, why she got shot, whether or not she was guilty or innocent. No, simply get her in here, save her lives. And hopefully we can have the same thing with people who have these addictions. Just save their lives. No need to shame them, no need to judge them. Just save their lives. All right, y'all know it's almost football season, so y'all know what that means. Media beefs will take a toll for the words. They will continue. And in the latest, I might have to make that a segment. We have Cam Newton versus Ryan Clark and Dan Orlovsky, but more so Ryan Clark. Now, this all stemmed from a top 10 quarterback conversation. Who is Jalen Hurts a top 10 quarterback? That was the discussion. Now, Cam Newton, to his logic, says no. Ryan Clark, Stephen A. Smith, Dan Orlovsky, they say yes. The issue that Cam has isn't that they disagree with him, but instead their job was to, quote unquote, attack Cam. Right? Terrell Owens said, come on, Cam, this ain't it. You acting like Skip Bayless with this take. Ain't nobody say nothing when you didn't jump on the football. The kid Gowie, I believe that's who it was, on his Instagram post, said the same thing. Like, come on, Cam, you ain't jump on the football. And we know, it just seems like that is a sensitive subject for Cam Newton. He's gone on record and says if he knew what he knew now, he would have jumped on the football. And everybody said, like, they bring up the fact that Jalen Hurts has won the Super Bowl, even beating Patrick Mahomes, who's considered the greatest of all. One of the greatest of all time has won the Super Bowl. Cam Newton didn't. Now, Cam's reasoning is that people don't have to necessarily game plan for Jalen Hurts when they beat the Eagles. They got to think about Saquon. They got to think about A.J. Brown. They got to think about the defense. That's valid. I consider Jalen Hurts a top 10 because, one, he's playing where he was drafted and he's doing his best and he won the Super Bowl. That's my opinion. Ryan Clark brought up the fact about Cam and he said, well, let's look at Cam. You know, he did this, he did that, but he didn't do this. And again, it goes back and it gets personal. It was even crazy when Cam Newton called himself Ether and Ryan Clark. So about second team All SEC, can't relate. Undrafted, can't relate. One-time Pro Bowl, can't relate. And the first thing people pointed out was he didn't bring up Super Bowl champion. So it's getting to a point when you look at these media beefs, you start to wonder, like, all right, where is the middle ground, right? We love having athletes' opinions, we as in y'all, on every podcast, every show, because we get an insight to the game. Right? Sometimes you have some athletes who have been so far removed from the game that you forget they played on the field. Or in the next generation, they may not even know. Like, oh, wait, he used to be an NFL player? Oh, I didn't know that. Those are the ones who sometimes they become real polished at their position, right? They may not have been the biggest star, but they've done such a phenomenal job. Then you have some who were prolific that do make the transition, and they're good at both. Like, I'm a Troy Aikman fan. I'm always going to remember he was a great quarterback. But there are people out there who may not rank him as high. So then you'll have people. And I look at like somebody like Ryan Clark, who I deemed would be a media star. The first time I saw him when I was working at ESPN, I said, oh, he's got it. Now, of course, I knew who Ryan Clark was, me being a Ravens fan. We all know what he did to Willis McGahee. I could see Ryan Clark in 20 years still doing what he's doing. And unless he constantly reminds you that he was a Super Bowl champion, the next generation may not realize that, hey, I didn't know he was like that, or I didn't know he was a football player, because when you think of that defense, the first person you think of is Troy Polamalu. So I sit back and I wonder, when you have all of these beef, where does it become acceptable? Because clearly there was Cam Newton's character attacked after his opinion was not liked, right? See, if Skip Bayless says it, somebody else will reply, but they can't bring up the fact that he had X amount of touchdowns, because he didn't. But people get to this point now where they attack the messenger, and the first thing they do is they attack their accolades. So that's where I'm wondering, where is that line drawn? Where's the line drawn where we stop attacking accolades, or we stop comparing accolades? Or tell me straight up, is that just a part of the game? Will we continue to do this? Because if that's the case, then we're going to be having media beefs for the rest of the time. Unless, Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady, but even both of them fell short in the Super Bowl, it would literally get to the point where the only person who can talk is Joe Montana. So that's all I'm saying about that. But hey, who doesn't love a good media beef? Before we get out of here, I got to bring up John Harbaugh and Donald Trump. The Baltimore Banner posted a clip where they asked John Harbaugh about his visit with President Donald Trump.
Past Donald Trump has said, denigrating things about Baltimore, including no DEP who want to live there. As a prominent representative of Baltimore.
Well, how you frame that question? I would frame the question like, you got a chance to go visit with the president, man. What was that experience like? It was amazing. It was awesome. And I promise you, I root for our president. I want our president to be successful, just like I want my quarterback to be successful, and I want my team to be successful. And it was an amazing experience. It's not often you get invited and you get a chance to do something like that as a family. We were there. My daughter was there. Jim's daughters were there. My mom and dad were there. My mom and President Trump. Just seeing how he treated her was really meaningful. And that's the fourth president. Now, Jim met 7. Jim has met 7 presidents, so he's got the lead on me. I think he pointed it out. Did you guys notice that? Right, he's got 7, I got 4. So had a chance to meet President Obama twice. Incredible experience. Had a chance to meet President Biden when he was vice president in Iraq, and spent a lot of time with him in Iraq, which was amazing. And then, 24, 25 years old, Jim got invited also to the White House to meet President Reagan because he was a Heisman Trophy candidate, and we got to go as a family. So I met President Reagan, have a picture in my office of that. So those are moments that I definitely cherish, and it means a lot.
John Harbaugh, coach of the Baltimore Ravens, that is not it. And I would have to say that John Harbaugh's Q score in Baltimore is probably dropping even more. When you think about the way he coaches, and then this in a predominantly black city that's not as conservative. We are a Democratic town, right? I just do not see that going over well. The first thing I saw in the comments was new coach, please. New coach, please. So I thought Harbaugh missed an opportunity. I would have accepted him answering the question, even if he would have said something along the lines of, the president has his feelings as far as Baltimore is concerned, and he's entitled to his feelings, but we know this is a great city. That's it. It's that simple. Then he could have went on and gloated about how well and how many sitting presidents and how him and Jim have this back and forth, and Jim sat with more sitting presidents. Fine, whatever. We can't excuse the fact Donald Trump is the president of the United States. And at the end of the day, most white men will take that opportunity. Not all of them, but most white men will take that opportunity. And the reason why I say most white men, because they won't have the same effects, because the way black men, black women, white women, and women of all other races, or men and women of all other races, feel, Donald Trump is no way, shape, or form for us. So I thought that was bad. And if John Harbaugh fails to stick with the run game, he better hope he has a position in Donald Trump's cabinet. Because quite frankly, I think Baltimore will be loud enough and Bashadi may make a move. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it for this heavy edition of Breaking Through Glass Ceilings. I'm your host, Brian H. Waters. Be sure to like, subscribe, click, share, and remember, folks, do not let anyone place a ceiling above your success. So long, everybody.